Hello, my name is Susanna, but if you ask me what my Hebrew name is, I would introduce myself as Miriam Shoshana Schuster. I belong to a discourse community of Jewish women. The most important goal that is shared by all of embodying a tradition from the Torah is by making challah for the Sabbath day. The Sabbath day is the seventh day of the week and is reserved for resting. It begins at sundown on Friday night and ends on Saturday at dusk. It is most Jewish women's goal to carry out the teachings of the Torah. As Ruth Weiss explained, more than the Torah itself, the written and the oral law that derives from Moses, Jewish civilizations seem to depend on the relation of the Jewish people to its sacred teachings. The biblical canon could have vanished within a generation had it not been kept perpetually alive through habits of study. The Torah lays the foundational basis for the life of all members of the Jewish community. Followers of Judaism learn traditions from the Torah and are responsible for carrying them out. One main goal is to encourage one's own perspective and experience to be used. Members of my discourse community will oftentimes take these lessons and find ways in which they can be applicable in the transformation of our own lives. A goal of most Jewish individuals is to celebrate a life lived with honor. For example, we celebrate the anniversary of one's death, or Yartzeit, rather than honoring their birthday. Another major goal shared by the Jewish community is the desire to find the insight and wisdom needed to continue living a meaningful life. Jewish people often connect themselves to their God through participating in living traditions. Members of the Jewish community usually will communicate with each other most frequently when attending a place of religious worship. The most prevalent examples of these are synagogues, Chabads, temples, schools, and hallels. Personally, I was a part of a temple until I became a member in my current Chabad. A Chabad is a location for exploring traditional Judaism following the teachings of the Chabad movement. My Chabad will communicate with me by sending emails and paper mail to remind me of upcoming events, reminders, and bat mitzvahs. I communicate with my peers from the Chabad using Facebook and sending text messages. Within these spaces of communication lies a place for prayer, worship, laughing, singing, meeting others of shared faith, and practicing traditions. Members of the Jewish community also use their homes as a space of communication. Many of the holidays observed by members of the Jewish faith are celebrated in part by holding a Seder in one's dwelling. To provide a personal example, my rabbi's wife generously used her home as a place to give me bat mitzvah lessons. She also invited my family and I over many Fridays for services for Shabbat. According to Tamar El-Or, Shabbat observance is governed by a large number of halakot that prescribe what must, may, and may not be done on this day. One Wednesday evening, the rabbi's wife Miriam invited me to her home to teach me how to make challah. Miriam taught me how to make my own loaf so that I could make it for celebrations of the Sabbath and holidays in my home. The genre for my group is specifically referred to as Jewish denominations. There are multiple types of subgenres of denominations that describe the unique practices of the different Jewish movements. The group's genres consist of secular Jews, Reform Jews, conservative Jews, Orthodox Jews, and Hasidic Jews. Those who identify as secular Jews oftentimes are culturally and or ethnically Jewish but do not actively practice Judaism. Reform Jews follow the Jewish religion but do not follow the dietary restrictions of keeping kosher. Conservative Jews follow Jewish tradition more strictly but will change for the adoption of Judaism to evolve with the congregation. Conservative Jews will usually keep kosher but are religiously Jewish. Hasidic Jews usually follow cultural restrictions towards women and education and will have limited involvement with people outside their community. Orthodox Jews are traditional, keep kosher, and have abided by mild restrictions. They view the Torah as unchanging and follow the application of their traditional law to modern situations. The subgenre for Orthodox Jewish community include Lithuanian, German, and Polish denominations. The main example of Lithuanian Jews include the Yeshivas, Musar, and Anti-Zionists. The key German groups are the Neo-Orthodoxy and Centrists. The most major examples of Polish Jewish groups incorporate Hasidism Jews, Lubavitch Jews, Messianic Zionism, and Sephardic Jews. I was a bat mitzvah under a Chabad Lubavitch rabbi, observing an Orthodox branch of Judaism. My subgenre would identify with Lubavitch Judaism. My group's genre and subgenres connected back to literacy through historical texts and culture. All of the genres and subgenres are focused around sacred texts, traditions, and cultures. Most importantly, one of the genres and subgenres have one thing in common: Hebrew. Hebrew is the official language of the Hebrews. After the destruction of Jerusalem, Hebrew became a literological language. Hebrew contributes to literacy through its incorporation in most Jewish texts and services. As described by Orel, one of the major Jewish observances is the study of Jewish religious texts. The highest form of learning is Torah, leshama, meaning religious study for its own sake, rather than for any practical purposes. The tools necessary for our cultural literacy include the ability to analyze Jewish texts and/or a place of worship. For many individuals, it is much easier and faster to attend services because they consist of multiple teachers of literacy. Often, places for worship may require fees or donations, limiting the amount of space accessible to those below the poverty line. Studying traditional texts, except for the Torah, can also be done on an individual basis within the home. Some of these texts include the Hebrew Bible, the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. The Mishnah and the Talmud can be learned in the home with heavy studies instead of the assistance of a religious figure. Many Jewish homes often have sacred texts on their bookshelves. Sheila Gillen emphasizes how bookshelves of Jewish people can serve as a reference guide for the many discussions to be had about the importance of intertextuality in Jewish literary tradition and its place in the formation of Jewish intellectuals and social identity. Other examples of home prayer books include the Siddur, Haggadah, and Sabbath Hymnal. The sponsors within the community that support Jewish learning include rabbis, moras, a cantor, or an ordained religious teacher who studied in a yeshiva. In my Chabad, the leader of the congregation is a rabbi. The Hebrew word for rabbi means my master or my teacher. The rabbi is a religious leader who is qualified to teach the Bible and Talmud. The most distinctive aspect about the group's lexis is the cultural connection. Hebrew is used in Judaism to help connect fellow Jews with their discourse community and God and Israel. Examples of common terminology include Manishma, Adonai, Mitzvah, Mazel Tov, Shalom, and Challah. Most importantly, challah is the Hebrew word for a braided bread prepared with egg, derived from Ashkenazi origins. Challah is generally eaten on special or ceremonial occasions. Chalos is usually prepared for use during Shabbat service and most of the high holidays. As a Jewish American woman, my goal is to embody the Torah. I practice this by making challah for Friday night Sabbath. By participating in this tradition, I am adding my voice and my part to the sacred conversation of the Jewish people. Much like the six-pointed star, the loaf of challah is a symbol of Judaism. Much like the crisscross shape of the bread, challah is intertwined with Jewish culture and history.